pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Let the roll call indicate that all 5 trustees are present, 4 of them here in the boardroom in person, and Phil Fillets on Zoom with us. This is being recorded. May I have a motion to approve the agenda? Fiona moves, and a second.
So moved.
And Debbie seconds. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that is a 5-0 on the agenda. Now, this would be the time for public comment on the only item listed here, which is the study session agenda. Is there any public that we know of, Debbie, that wants? Apparently not. There's no one here. Right. So we will now have the budget session. Or Dr. Meyer, would you like to lead off?
Yes, thank you, President Vonnegut, Board of Education. In response to big decisions that we're needing to make regarding next year's funding, and also in response to completing our first interim and wanting to really know what we're, to have a strong plan as we move forward for fall. We bring before you a budget study session. So not only can we share information, but also hear feedback and really have that interactive conversation about our direction. So with that, I would like to go ahead and share. As we create our budget, we start with the Board of Education goals and the importance of emphasizing all students and making sure that their performance is accelerated by our school district. You know these goals, and we are currently discussing what the path forward will be in 22-23, but the importance of aligning curriculum, grading systems and practices, promoting STEM, looking at the well-being of our students, as well as our facilities and fiscal stability. This goal certainly is a discussion of the last goal, but all of them interact. I want to take just 2 seconds to thank all 3 of the departments represented here on the dais. During the last 1.5 years, and certainly through negotiations, our Human Resource Personnel Department has had quite a few challenges, not only with COVID designee duties, but also with looking at the forecast, the financial forecast. Also our ed services, we continue to teach and learn and have professional development and move forward with initiatives despite the last 2 years. So thank you to ed services. And then also you're going to hear a lot of the detailed work that our business services department has done. So we're very excited to present our team, but I did want to publicly thank each of them because they worked very hard. So what you can see here, I've shown this to you before, our emphasis on student success, looking at school site goals, how they interplay with our WASC plans, our LCAP, our CSACE and AVID, and many of those have overlapping goals, and looking at how to promote academic excellence, professional learning, parent community engagement, as well as wellness. So those are the big categories that we have looked at as we have looked at initiatives and the budget. And our foundation really includes the Board of Education, who make the policy, who make those big decisions that impact our students, and under the even further foundation of equity. So this is our guide as we make decisions and adjust our budgets. So real quickly, we wanted to just emphasize college and career. We're going to talk, you will hear from Mike about the investments that we've made in college and career, and we've continued with that and see that as a primary focus. But these primary focuses are not in any particular order because they're all important. Wellness, we'll look at the detailed investment that we've made in wellness. English learner support, very excited about that new program and continuing the English learner support that we have within our district and targeting students that need that help. As we look at other initiatives, we are in the process of developing career technical education plans. And we wanted to put that on everyone's radar because that is a cost item and it does address some of the needs of our students very fully. And then option B, independent study. I put this on here and just to state that this is something that does work for some of our students. So we're continuing it. And we think we can develop the independent study to do some creative things in the future. So we don't have the high numbers we had during the pandemic, obviously. And then over the last couple of years, you certainly know, and I was able to visit it today, Middle College. And Middle College is really also a wonderful, successful program. And this board, doubling the size, really has made a difference in the lives of the students that are there, and they're thriving. So with that, kind of seeing the foundation and decisions and the team that has done the work, I want to hand it over to Mike, who's going to talk to us about the details of the budget and where we are fiscally. So
great, thanks, Dr. Meyer. And just a couple things by way of intro. It was on the first slide, but when there's financial information on these slides, it's based upon the first interim budget, which goes back to the fall. And just to put us in the budget cycle, we're right in the midst of actually preparing for the board the second interim budget report. So, some of the numbers are a little bit dated, but it's on the most recent, approved, confirmed report. And there have been a few revisions to the slide deck since it was posted earlier in the week. But I know there's hard copies available. I believe this is the revised copy, and we have uploaded the revised copy if people are following along at home or want to go back and look at it and whatnot. So just want to clarify that. And just quickly, budget study sessions can take on many different forms and definitions. And the focus of this is not so much the technical part of here's what account streams are and here's our buckets of staffing costs and things like that, but it's really to highlight the things that align with our goals and some initiatives we've been working on and the additional resources and programs we've implemented to acknowledge that, show that, and then talk about ways in which we maybe need to align even more our resources with the services that we want to provide our students. So I'll go. Feel free to interrupt and ask questions if it pertains to that slide. I think we're fine. Dr. Meyer talked about fine if the questions, come intermittently, but of course there will be time at the end. And then the second portion, although a much shorter portion, is just an update on our COVID funds since we've gotten them, just to kind of discuss how we're using those and what still remains.
And I have to say also for staffing or ed services questions, certainly we have experts in the room as well.
So it's hard to not do a budget study session without saying, well, what's our total revenue and what's the funds at our disposal? So this slide just as a reminder of, we have almost $118 million in revenue in our budget year. And then for us, again, the bulk of that comes from local property taxes, 78.6%. So that just sets the context for almost everything we talk about, whether it be the state budget and the extent to which that impacts or does not impact us, what the drivers are for our budget. And then of course, a reminder, other sources of revenue come from some minimum state aid, that's about $3 million, our shoreline partnership with the city, the foundation, some federal and state grants, and then other local donations of which we do benefit from and enjoy. So, but again, almost 80% is that local property tax. So we keep a keen eye on what's going on with tax revenue growth, up, down, flat, and whatnot, different from what people hear at the state level and state funding of COLA and what increased to LCFF funding formula. On the expenditure side, they almost match revenue. This is slightly less, again, based upon first interim, which indicates at that moment in time, we're projecting a surplus. And like every school district in the state, the bulk of those expenditures are in personnel. It's people. We are a people-driven organization. We serve students, And we do that through, adults working in various capacities to provide those services and support for students. 80%, a lot of districts statewide might be closer to 85. Some of this just comes from our revenue and our budget and where some of those funds are targeted. But it just helps us keep in mind, when we talk about budget and expenses and where we want to change things, it's really people driven for the most part. Within that and overlapping, if I was going to do a Venn diagram or overlapping circles, there's just some other key areas I think to keep in mind as we set the stage. We spend 3% of our expenditures on maintenance. That's a required amount. You get a portion of that is personnel costs. So some of our maintenance and facility staff get charged to that. Special education, which we've highlighted in our various budget reports, is almost $19 million. And again, a large portion of that is personnel costs. So this isn't going to add up to 100% if you did the math, right? Because a lot of that special ed cost is included in the personnel costs up on that top line. Instructional materials, because this is important, and just wanted to highlight, because it's 2 buckets of money. We get money from the state in the form of lottery, and we also designate some of our general funds, which again come from those property taxes to support our students, almost $1 million with instructional materials. And that's really textbooks or other ancillary materials. Now it's a lot more web-based textbooks, for lack of a better term, as we look at what those resources are. And then just wanted to highlight too, that we do provide the comprehensive high school sites a per student amount. We call it site allocation. It's just over $1 million. And the principals then take that budget, and that's more at their discretion and disposal. And that really provides money that they distribute to the departments or they use school-wide. So this is for things for like science equipment and, lab materials or copy costs, graduation expenses, other whole school events. Some of it supports athletics. So that's a bucket of money that's more managed at the site level, but goes to fund a lot of things that are often not seen. And sometimes we say, oh, the district pays for that or the site pays for that. It's all district funds. Often what we're referring to is kind of where's the local autonomy or local control over allocating those funds.
Mike, could I interrupt you a moment?
Yes, Phil, go ahead. There's
thank
other
you.
people here that have questions, but go first.
Oh, okay. I can't, you're even smaller than you can imagine on my screen. So I didn't see that, sorry. My question is simply for the school site allocations. Do we have a breakdown of how this money is spent at the school sites?
So I can certainly get that for you. We would need to ask the principals for that, right? So at the district level, we track it more by the accounting string, what's spent on people and things, but not by department, right? Because our budgeting report doesn't get to that level of detail, but that's certainly something we could ask of the principals to provide.
I think the board would like to make that request. The other question there is, historically, in the last couple of years, have they used it all? This is a case where it's a huge amount of money per school, and we have a lot of programs that are in this size range, if you will. And if they've used as much as they need and they're not buying things that they need as much in the next year, or we could compare lists or something, maybe that's the one place we could reallocate to a different bucket.
So if I can, the short answer is last year, which is an aberration and probably not a good test. No, that by no means that they use all of it, but that's mostly due to remote learning. Prior years, and it tracks differently at each school. I'd say one school spends almost all of it more regular than the other. We do allow them to carry it over, right? Because this is meant to benefit students and then use it in the subsequent year. And so most of the time it does all get spent, right? But again, it's sometimes on a variety of things. So like if Los Altos High School wants to buy more umbrellas to go on their outdoor tables to create more outdoor seating, they can use that funds to do so. Often student desks and chairs to replace that comes out of these funds. So it's, it's broad in terms of often what it covers. But so, and they often, anyway, so that's the short answer to that.
Go ahead, Debbie.
Okay, so I have a couple questions.
Oh, turn your mic on.
First of all,
That's per site, right? The
No,
one that-
that's total.
Okay. that was
That's
my
total
first
for
one.
Mountain View and
That's
Los Altos
total.
combined. Yep.
Okay,
Mhm.
and the number in itself is like 1,066,000. I mean, how
Yeah.
did you come up with the number? It just seems like. the
So,
number's
yeah, it's
not
a per
round
student.
number of Like 11.
Yeah. It's a per student number based upon enrollment, 200 and it's probably up to 10 or 15. I'll find the number. You know, it's baked into our adopted budget development program. And when I took over in 2014, we took the existing number and we just increase it by inflation factor CPI each year and adjust it for enrollment. So it is a per student dollar amount
Okay,
that increases every year based upon the Bay Area CPI.
okay.
Now, how it was ever started in the first place, I would have to do some history on that and find out, but that's where the total number comes
And
from.
does that also include Alta Vista?
No.
So it's just our mainstream?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Alta Vista, it's more of a flat amount given their low enrollment and differing needs, but they have a small one as
Yeah.
well.
And so the other thing is, if you could get to us later, I'd like to know what their fund balances are now.
Mhm.
You know, how much has been carrying over? So if they can carry it over year to year to year. I mean, at one school, there might be
Mhm.
a bit, and I don't know if you know, if we can incentivize them by you have to use it this year
Mhm.
or you lose it, you know.
So we
can
do
yell
that
at-
exact thing. They don't perpetually carry it over. They can carry it over 1 year and then
One year.
and we
Okay.
track that carryover separately. It has a separate code. And when they go to purchase something, they will indicate I'm using my carryover or I'm using my current year allocation. So we do track that and we remind them quite a bit, hey, here's how much is left. Spend it on great things for kids to support what's going on. But after the first year they carried over, if there's any remaining, they don't get to keep that. It just comes back in the general funds and kind of falls the bottom line and gets mixed in with the rest of the allocation.
Yeah, and I would also be interested in seeing what type of purchases, because I know we have innovation grants they're getting. There's all these other different monies as well as the district paying.
Mhm.
So I mean, just curiosity, maybe
Mhm.
they can buy whatever they need, I'm sure. But
Yeah, and this, you know, as examples, it helps to offset art supply costs, right? So to make sure they have those materials, even some materials that they have to replenish. We try to remind them of different various departments, performing arts, athletics, that this money is allocated to help support those things as well. But we can certainly get that to you, as well as the amounts that were carry over from the prior year.
Okay, so just a last thing on this, and I know we're down a rabbit hole on, you know, $1 million out of a huge
okay.
budget, but
That's why we're doing the study session, I think.
this has been something that's been front of mind, I think, for a bunch of us for a while. So I don't know if there's a maximum percentage that they can carry forward year to year, but that's a conversation at another time that I would certainly be willing to have if others are interested. I think that's an incentivizer or a demonstration from the site that says, look, we're budgeting for a bigger ticket item and we need this much into next, you know, whatever it is, to allow for some exceptions and flexibility. I don't want to be in the weeds of you can't spend it on, you know, that's not where I'm trying to go. I just want it to get spent or resorbed. And then the ancillary piece to this is most of us have, you know, come through at least 1 or 2 PTSA meetings, if not 10 or 12, where some body on campus has come to PTSA saying, you know, school won't, you know, maybe they haven't even talked to school, but they go to PTA first and they say, parents, will you fund XYZ? And PTSA doesn't know, they don't know to push back and say, well, that's a school expense or this. So I think, you know, anyway, I think there's some communication opportunities around this bucket of money, particularly if it's not getting spent, because, you know, every time we walk a campus, a teacher says, oh, I could really use this. Okay, well, you know, should that come from the school or the PTSA or where? Enough, done.
No,
Sanjay, did you have any more to add? No?
I think a deep dive.
Okay.
I think you had the message, so I'm not gonna.
Although we're not off the slide because I have another question on technology.
certainly.
Do we
Oh, I
have
skipped over that one. I'm sorry.
do we have a historical slide of the last several years of spending in technology and how it's gone up or down, or how the innovations that Bob have done
So no, I don't.
have affected that, and how that affects what our projection should or would be? And the things that are still deficient in our environment.
Yeah. And thank you for calling it out. And my apologies, I skipped right over when I looked at it, or when I was presenting on the slide. So no, I don't have a slide prepared, of course, for historical spend.
Right. I didn't,
that.
Don't we have that data?
We have that data, and I can say with confidence that we've invested more in technology than we have historically.
Yeah.
Much to my appreciation, much to, I think, student and staff appreciation. I think we're reaping the benefits, the positive benefits of that, and it shows. And part of why we included this really was to call it out. So thank you for calling out my glossing over it or skipping it, is that, you know, we see the payoff in those investments, right? And I think historically that was probably underfunded or underspent and patchwork of things. And when we do it right and invest the money, you know, then it's great to walk into a classroom virtually or in person and say, hey, the technology is going to work, and so let me focus on the other things, right? Unless Comcast line goes out in the neighborhood and, you know, then we're stuck, which happened 2 weeks ago. So, all right.
Just to echo, not,
Yeah.
not a complaint, just a curiosity. Thank you, Bob, for all the work.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we've seen it both the hardware and infrastructure improvements, but also in staffing, right? And we've shared with the board before, increasing staffing positions going back, you know, 7 or 8 years ago, as well as recently as we adapted due to COVID. And so it's great to have that support staff.
And I don't know, we have a current so-called technology plan that goes out 3 to 5 years, or 10, or however different ones go. But in terms of that curve of year to year projection of what might need, you might need more people, you might need more stuff. And of course, technology changes so rapidly, maybe you don't know, but
I always need more people, so.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
But we actually are, Barry, Ellen, and I already discussed this, that we're gonna have the technology component for the LCAP, so it's not a standalone program, right? We're gonna have a massive
Mike, could I interrupt a minute again? Whoever was just speaking, I didn't, I mean, there were random words generated here. I think whoever it was wasn't close enough to a mic.
Yeah, that was Bob off to the side. And yes, we're moving a microphone to him now, although he probably won't speak again, but that's okay. But yeah, in the short version, Phil, as he was saying, that a technology plan incorporating into the LCAP. So it's not a standalone document, but really incorporated into one of those many other existing plans. And I'll just wrap up with the technology by saying, I think the perspective has become, rather than either Band-Aids or reactionary, oh, we need to do this and fixing it, is really, it's almost like the we do for our facilities is there's an annual expense, and we're just gonna, it's a 5-year recycle replenishment. You know, we have a great inventory system now. So, you know, Bob and his team know who has what computer, how old it is, what type it is, who's up for the next rotation. And it's almost more of a proactive approach to constantly maintain and keep those things up to speed, up to the right level. And I think that's paying off, right? Even with the audio visual projectors in the classrooms and sound systems to make sure everyone's up to a certain level. And then we just have a planned replenishment cycle.
Can I ask a follow on to the technology? So I can't remember what year it was now, 2016, maybe. We did a master, we hired a consultant to come in, and they did an assessment of all of our technology and then wrote us up a plan, you know, where we were in each area, we were deficient. Yeah. Anyway, so is there any need to maybe want to do another one of those plans and hire a consultant to come in and evaluate where we are today?
Yeah,
That's part of the master plan, that we are going to be using a consultant, and I've already identified one. I have.
I believe it was actually from 2012 or 2013, actually.
Yeah, it's pretty old.
And I say that I moved in this position in 2014, and at the same time, I think we added the technology coordinator position, which in part was an outcome of that outside assessment. So that's why I'm dating the study and myself.
Yeah, I mean, I remember reading through that, and there's been so many changes now, and I know Bob's done an incredible job getting us up to speed with our hotspots and all these cool things, but it just might be nice to have a full plan done again, or you know, an assessment.
Okay.
I think that's kind of costly.
Yeah, some of those outside studies can be,
Well,
but
certainly
we've done it.
Review of that assessment.
Right.
Yeah, in comparison to
I think that
now
makes
or
sense.
Yep. And when you want those greater details, like I know we do work closely with an outside tech consultant and company, and even like heat maps for the proper placements of wireless access points and network inventory and things of that nature that we already have or could provide to if you ever wanted that. Some of you might, all of you, I don't know. Anyway, I'm moving us on. This slide really is just a pause to call out, when we talk about people, which is almost 80% of our budget, and talk about staffing, we say it, but here's the numbers behind it. When we hire a person, there's their salary, and then there's these statutory costs that go with it. And then on top of that, there's also the medical benefits piece, right? So this just clarifies we pay pension at STRS or PERS, whether it's certificate and classified, Social Security on our classified folks, Medicare, unemployment insurance, and workers' comp. So it's 20% to 32% on top of salary plus medical benefits when we're talking about staffing costs. And so people are our biggest investment, our most important investment, but it does come with those costs. And so it's just helpful for us here in the room or anyone that's watching this later to understand the cost drivers that go with that. And in particular, the STRS and PERS, which again, 9 years ago, STRS was 8.25% and PERS was probably 10-ish, percent, 12%.
Yeah, and that's my question. What's the projected increase to each one of those?
STRS will go up to 19.1 next year. And that is in the multi-year projection assumptions, if people want to refer to that. 19.1 STRS for next year, and then it will remain flat. So
okay.
The good news, if you want to look at silver lining, is at least it levels off. PERS, the PERS board just met and I think updated theirs, but it's 25.4 next year.
And is it flat then?
Only because I had to look at this recently. It's supposed to go down to 25.2 and actually maybe slightly decrease. It's not approved by PERS yet. The board has to meet, but those numbers came out. They do an annual update based upon their investment returns, right? And based upon how that's doing, they then adjust how much needs to be contributed.
Right. I thought I'd read somewhere that they were thinking about putting more on us. Did you read that?
Yeah, yes and no, but also the state budget. Nobody apart from Newsom is happy that we didn't get some money for PERS and STRS for pension funds. That's not going to fly. So there will be some money, but we just don't know what it is.
Okay. I read something about it.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm saying PERS 25.4 and 25.2. I mean, the last week I would have had different numbers. It would have been like 26 point something, and then 27.1. And again, that's just, they look at their investment returns and how that's doing and what employee contribution there is. And yeah, to Fiona's point, STRS is at 16.92. It was supposed to be higher than that when you look back a few years ago. But with the budget surplus and one-time investments the state government has made, they've allowed that to stay at the 16.1 range, 16.92. So on paper, it's supposed to go up to 19.1, but that's why we have the governor's budget proposal. And then a lot happens in the intervening months. Then we have a May revision. So we're going to look forward to see if that number changes.
Okay, the medical part, you didn't put a percentage for that.
Correct.
Because?
So, well, I could. It's not a percentage of salary driven, and so it's a different measurement.
So it's
all in, it's about, it could be up to $34,000 in medical costs, depending on, it depends on which medical plan people choose, and there's a range. So
that's for a single person.
For a single person.
34,000.
For medical, dental, and vision.
Wow.
I'm using the highest medical plan.
Phil, did you also want to ask a question?
Yes, thank you, Catherine. So Mike, on the STRS PERS projections, I have a question about the reliability of the people who do the projections. And I don't expect you to do this yourself, but if you could look into whether somebody independent of that agency has checked their history of projections to see how reliable they are. There might be a more reliable set of projections based on the current board's historical accuracy. Again, that's not something for you personally to take on or your department, but if you could just look to see if somebody else has already done that work.
Sure. Yeah, we could do that. Okay. Yep. And wrapping up medical, it's not a percentage of salary, and so it does vary depending on Kaiser or Cigna, whether the HMO plan or the high deductible with health savings account contribution. But yes, it's well compensated individuals with
And
those
I
plans.
have to say that our district is, pays the whole boat on those things, as opposed to many districts locally have a, shall I say, per employee or contribution. And then that's maybe more than bare bones, but it's something or a percentage of something. And then if you want a different one, you pay a different amount.
Yep, it's very
And
very
so
common.
not only would we pay one of the better salaries, but we also have some of the best benefits.
Yeah, when Layla and I are in negotiations and look at comparability, we're looking at total compensation, which includes salary and the benefits. Yes, and it is far more common to see a max or cap on contribution benefits by the employer, whether it be school districts or private sector businesses, or some sort of cost sharing. So yes, this is something a little bit more unique still to MVLA, but that's something also that as we sit and negotiate has been something that's prioritized and valued by the membership to maintain as possible. Okay, so we're going to dive into a couple slides that really just highlight certain categories and initiatives and areas of emphasis for the district. So this first one is wellness, and really, without getting into all the details, but the intent is to a summary number, because often we look at these in bits and pieces and individuals or campuses or programs like, oh, what's CHAC or what's, our special ed therapists or what's going on with, these folks. So really try to take a holistic look at it, add up the numbers again, almost all of it's people, to give a number in many ways to highlight the positive stuff we're doing to provide stuff for kids and the dollar amount in financial resources that we have invested. And anticipating the question, if I did a historical slide on this, I can state with 100% confidence this has grown, especially in recent years. Right, I remember the years where there was maybe one contracted therapist on site specifically to help support, a program at Los Altos, and how that's grown. Or CHAC had associates, formerly called interns, but more limited, hours and individuals. So when we look at that over $3 million in wellness, you can see the list of what that includes, from a wellness coordinator to the on-campus CHAC associates to 6 MVLA therapists, acknowledging they primarily are supporting a lot of our students with special ed services written in the IEP. We've added, and you'll see this again in a later slide when we highlight our initiatives this year, but the contracted social workers who can do more than just a licensed therapist.
I mean, you don't,
Yeah. Yep, sure.
You don't have to read through the list.
Understood.
I think we see that.
Yeah.
So, just a few questions. So the two contracted workers, the social workers and therapists. So the two contracted therapists, are they not associated with CHAC? And why aren't they? Why can't we use CHAC for all of them instead of having? And why do we need to have specific contractors in those two cases and the specific MVLA therapist? Do we need? Why?
So, good question. Thank you. One is that CHAC was having a difficult time finding us, clinicians, therapists. The second is a lot of the cases that we were dealing with were pretty high acute, and some of those cases they needed to have one of our therapists help out with the high acuity, and so those two reasons helped us determine that it would be best if we got a licensed veteran therapist into place.
So have we considered looking at other agencies other than CHAC that could supply the people that we need, as opposed to us hiring them?
So so CHAC isn't the only organization that has had some struggles finding interns or those that are associates. We do work with Uplift, and they too were struggling to find therapists. We were really looking for a Spanish-speaking therapist from the beginning, and both of those services had some struggles. I know William Blair was talking to another agency. The name of it, I don't recall.
Was it Momentum?
Huh?
Momentum?
That doesn't sound familiar. So we were, he was having conversations about another organization to see what they were offering and if it was any different than CHAC, as we do have a long-term relationship with them. So.
Okay, yeah, because I'd be interested in knowing if there's another agency we could consider that could supply majority of what we need, at least or more so. I'm assuming the 6 MVLA therapists are classified.
Yep.
employees, so they are
Recently moved
they are
into
part
the,
of the additional statutory costs, right, that we have to pay. That's added to that. But the 2 contracted therapists are not, right? So they're just an hourly.
2 contracted therapists are on a professional expert contract for this school year.
So-
Because they were in addition due to the pandemic needs coming back, and they were additional. We are going to evaluate at the end of this school year.
And so similar to bilingual therapists that you mentioned, CHEC couldn't support it. And so that's, but now is that person a full-time classified? What is that person?
So that was a professional contract as well, and we are currently reviewing the model to determine.
Okay, so that's an annual.
yeah, the professional expert contracts, to be clear, they are then considered our employees with the costs that go with them and eligible for medical benefits. It's separate from an independent contractor, right? Where you pay somebody and then they have to handle all that. So it's a,
Oh, yeah, I didn't realize that. So
Yeah.
contracted and contractor are different.
yeah, I mean, we could modify this. I mean, we could say professional expert contract, but it's probably not a term used a lot.
So for this year, even though for every year though, you're saying that we pay their salary and we pay their benefits for the year.
Mhm.
But every year we can reevaluate, decide whether we want to keep them or not. And all that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we tend to use the professional expert when we, have a need, but it may not be permanent, because when we purchase FTE and fill the FTE and put it within the bargaining unit, then it stays unless you do a layoff. So this is, a more temporary type of employment, but with all the benefits of becoming an MVLA employee for the period of time in which we contract with the person.
So I guess, so could I request that maybe we get another update on the wellness to see what are the other organizations that are out there available that maybe we can get the services that we need for our district, that, and maybe we can make look at a cost benefit analysis of the whole thing, as well as, what are the recommendations from you, Terry, and the staff, and William, and everybody else. I think that would be.
Okay, I want to let Phil go next because I don't want to miss him. Yeah.
Thank you, Catherine.
That's great.
Yes, thank you.
All right, Phil, your turn.
Okay, great, thank you. So I have a question. I'm not clear on the distinction that Sanjay is attempting to make here. Are the contracted therapists from an agency, or are they independent people who just have the shingle out?
The contracted therapists that we were just referencing, they are not with an agency. They have come to us as a, temporary contract employee. We have contracted in the past with agencies, but this is not the situation for this school year.
Okay, because the difference here, I mean, if you have a contracted therapist and it's through an agency, then whether you have it from CHAC or some other agency, it's still a contracted therapist.
And Phil, I just want to qualify that what I was speaking of, we do have a contract with CHAC. We just haven't contracted with any other outside agency this school year.
I understand. And I think Sanjay is just asking the question, well, can we get the service we need at a more economical price, which is a very reasonable question to ask. What I am not clear on is how independent contractors are known to us.
How did we find our independent contractors this year?
Yes, the one that we have here as 2 contracted therapists underneath 2
Sure.
contracted social workers.
Sure. We posted them much like we post any of our other positions. But we offer them a contract as opposed to an FTE permanent or probationary position where they could gain permanent status. Much like a teacher. Sometimes you will hire a temporary teacher to fill in for a leave. This is a very similar type situation.
I see. And they serve at the pleasure of the school district, except
They
for
have
whatever their contract provides.
Correct. They have typically, and in this case, a 1-year contract with us. And it terminates at the end of the school year. And then the district would have to decide to up the contract for the next school year. And then they would sign an additional contract if they were to continue with us.
Okay, and so my last request here is that could we see a sample contract?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So I have one thing to say that being on the wellness committee I've heard is that having a contracted therapist or contracted for a year is a benefit, because what we have been seeing on the campuses sometimes is a large turnover, and a lot of training is having to happen from our therapists to train all the new people that are always coming on. So I think it's nice to have the consistency of a contracted person who's here for a year, the same person. Whereas if we go with like Cte, sometimes they're swapping them in and out, and some of them are junior kind of entry people. And I've heard that our therapists sometimes have to spend some time having to bring people up to speed, which is detrimental to being able to provide all the services right off the bat to our students.
It was one of the reasons that our contract with our MOU with Cte was a little steeper this year, is that we were asking for a full time. So we did have that consistency day in and day out, even though next year it may be a different, but you're absolutely right that there's some hardships when it ebbs and flows from who's here on which days and part-time.
And sometimes, having formerly been on wellness, the protocols that are used by different therapists in different situations vary, and we have to all be on board on the kind of records we keep and but what I also like about contracted is that should our need go down some, we are not in a position of having to lay off FTE. So if we have a consistent person for the whole year that we really like, and we can continue with them on 1 year at a time, that saves us from the funding for full-time employees, should we not need them.
Well, I know we always want more.
Well, yeah, but that's
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, Fiona.
No, I'm gonna go one more down the list to the ELL case manager. I'm assuming that the dollars for that person are not in the total up top because they're coming from somewhere else and they're passing through.
Correct.
I would just be curious what those dollars are, because we get asked all the time, what you write in a big, 60,000 foot view, not even a 30, how much are you spending on wellness? And effectively those dollars are being spent on our students. So just, sometime in the next month or something, or whenever, I would just be curious what that position, how much that grant is, or how much that position costs that we're benefiting from.
Sure.
Thanks.
I was just gonna ask, just on that, if we could just get maybe like a pie chart of exactly what the expenses are.
Yeah.
Kind of just give us
This all came from a spreadsheet that you're not seeing that just rolled up. So actually it's pretty easy to provide. And the one provided by Santa Clara County, I can find out how much that's costing or what they're giving a CSA to pay for that, certainly.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And
Thanks.
there is some money through the El Camino as
Mhm.
well.
Yep.
Roughly 78,000.
100.
Now, this is going to come up in a later slide,
Shell
but there was a
Camino
mention of increasing changing the salary category of the therapist. I mean, we
We
agreed
already-
to do that, but didn't.
I think both are right. So
I mean,
we,
but I don't know what that amount was or I don't know all the details of that.
okay.
So you
So
don't have to tell me now, but I just.
sure, there's going to be information coming in our next board meeting. We did just TA with the CSEA unit. And there is a recalibration within that document. I don't want to speak out of turn, but you can anticipate some information in order to maintain competitiveness. So you will see some information. What also you may be referring to is in 2019, we incorporated actually our 6 that are listed here, professional expert therapists into the unit, and they became FTE'd CSEA therapists. So yes.
Actually, I want to look up the minutes of when we agreed to change their salary category. I mean, I remember discussing it, but I don't remember voting on it.
It will be coming for a vote at the next board meeting.
Okay. All right.
Phil does have his hand up, so
Hi,
I don't want to be
Phil
out of
again.
turn, but go
Your
ahead,
turn,
Phil.
Okay, thank you. On the contracted social workers, I think somebody was talking about them when they said this comes out of another bucket. Is that correct? Is this paid for by the county or some special grant?
Yeah, so let me clarify and maybe add to that, right? So one of the things that we mentioned before is acknowledging that we do get money from an El Camino hospital grant. It's actually $160,000 per year. It used to be 150. It used to cover 2 full-time independent contractor positions and now barely covers 1 whole position, but that just is shows you what it gets you these days. So there is that money that's not reflected in terms of revenue for this. The MVLA Foundation provides money over $200,000 to pay for and to help offset the cost of 2. It used to be the intake coordinators that CHAC provided. This is where it gets confusing, but the foundation continues to want to help support mental health and wellness. So there is some funding that comes into us for this. So Phil, I think there's a couple different things. The ELL case manager is provided by Community Services Agency. We don't see any money for that. We don't pay any salary. That money goes directly from the county government to CSA, and they staff it, but that person is on our campuses and we provide a space for them, and they're targeting that student population. So that's part of it. The 2 contracted social workers is this year's version of last year, what we call the intake coordinators, right? And the intake coordinators were provided by CHAC, but this gets back to Terry shared. The needs were more than, what kind of that CHAC could provide, and those people, and even CHAC said, that's not something we can support you with this year. So that prompted us to go out on our own and say, okay, how do we find this on our own? And if we're going to do it on our own, the needs are really more like a social worker, more expansive, and can do that. And that, like on a line item basis, the foundation helps support the 2 former intake coordinator positions, now social workers. It's not the full cost, and I've shared that with them, but a significant portion of that. And then much of the.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. That gets me to the point I wanted to make here. It seems to me that a social worker, whether the social worker being used as an intake coordinator or for some other purpose, that is really not a function of a school district. That seems to be part of the county mental health and health services generally, to direct people in the right places to get the right services that they need. Are we making any effort for the county to pony up for this?
This is Fiona, Phil. Hi. Yeah, ideally, I mean, I agree with you. We've all talked about, what's our box, right? What's the box of school? Where does school services end and where do other services have to kick in? Anyway, in my role, I don't know, this is almost a 50-50 split position, right? Because this is the person who's the edge of the box. This is the person who does the warm handoff to get the person outside of our services when it's beyond our services. So, but to answer your question, I'm sure Nellie has asked 1,000 times to have county do this. And I think it's is it Board of Soups who are providing the ELL case manager? It's not Board of Ed.
Yes.
It's not.
No, it's not.
It's
It's not the county
Board
office
of
of
Ed,
Ed.
it's Board of
County.
Soups. So I guess we could check with Board of Soups, actually.
We could advocate with the other groups.
Yeah, but I'll send it back to Nellie. Yeah.
I was going to say the same thing Catherine stated, that this is an opportunity for, I believe, board members and myself and others to advocate, perhaps have meetings on this topic. The superintendents in the county wrote a letter to county public health regarding the COVID crisis. But I believe that we also need to look at writing and meeting to discuss and advocate surrounding the mental health crisis. And to me, they're directly related, and certainly one has been exacerbated by the other. So I think that's an advocacy point that we all should get together and plot out, and I think really put at the top of our priority list.
Yeah, and I'll-
Maybe another way to ask Phil a question, I guess, is how many other districts are paying, have a budget in there for, and to hire social workers in their district and have social workers in their district? Do we know the answer to that?
We can ask.
Yeah, because mean,
I think Layla has a good sense.
I think it is, I don't want to use the word common because I would rather provide better data, but I think it is typical that there are these services. We are also, between Mike, Terry, and myself, we have found out that there is some reimbursement. We're investigating how it will qualify for school link services, which is oftentimes many kind of, and it is up, from what we have heard, is up to $100,000. Again, it won't cover everything, but it would definitely assist. We're trying to find out which positions we have might qualify and how to demonstrate that that's occurring, because we are doing much of what this reimbursement covers. So that is sort of a new information that we're investigating how that reimbursement will work.
So I definitely agree that this is something that we should continue to look into. When CHAC last year decided that they did not want to continue the intake coordinator position, we looked at that as a potential for us, because the intake coordinator is the only person that really supports the mental health of our general education students. And that these students come through, every single one of them comes through our intake coordinator. Our intake coordinator docks them, follows up with them, communicates to, you know, the admin or the counselor, et cetera. And seeing such a vulnerable population, and we just talked about turnaround from year to year and not knowing the system and how to onboard, we did find that potentially this was a great benefit to us to be able to have one MVLA consistent person supporting and tracking and following up with our gen ed mental health students.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Oh, I was just going to add that the model that is used in probably 95% of other campuses, I'm not saying it's the better model, is where the students go to their counselor. So the ratio of adult to student is lower. So our ratio, you'll see, I'm going to steal your thunder,
That's all
Mike.
right.
It's 250 to 1. So within that 250, then you have someone tracking around 250 instead of 2,200 on each campus, but they do have other duties. So I think that makes it a little bit apples to oranges. But I agree, there are social workers on other campuses and they're funded typically with grants, but I believe our neighbors who are also basic aid also have social workers.
Yeah. Phil, I'm going to jump in real quick. I see your hand again. The County School Boards Association did send a similar letter to the superintendent's letter that went to Board of Supervisors saying, we are not a public health agency. We cannot continue in this vein. And we got a very nice attaboy pat on the back from Dr. Smith saying, keep up the good work. So Phil, just to your point, we are trying, we're not done. School Boards Association meeting with legislators. This is our message. We are not public health agencies. This has to be, if it's now an endemic, remove it from the school, blah, blah, blah. So working on it.
Great. Thank you, Fiona. Just one last question here. So our contracted social workers seem to do some mental health, physical health promotion for students. And they seem to handle things because their name is social worker, which really don't involve directly mental or physical health, but rather involve other kinds of services like how do I go about applying for unemployment or those kinds of things. So do we have an idea of the breakdown of how much of this is being directed to non-health services and how much of their service, their hours, is going to directly to mental health and physical health that would involve their education?
Is anyone going to say something about that, or is that just a question we need to look into?
Yeah, we can pull that data together.
Okay.
Agreed.
Okay, and when we get to the next slide on academic counseling services, it'll dovetail in with wellness, and we can continue the flow between the different groups in our discussion. Any more on this one before we have Mike flip the slide back?
I didn't plan it, but and you guys didn't see it, but the teen health van actually drove by earlier during our meeting,
It
and
did.
I was like, oh, like all right on cue almost, but anyway, it's in there.
I noticed that,
So.
and I also heard some children out there, maybe not, and not happy children testing.
All right, well, we'll jump on the next slide, and given time, it's all there. And Dr. Meyer mentioned when you look all in, 18 counselors divide, and the number of students, it does come out in a ratio of 250 to 1, acknowledging that the way we have assigned counselors and responsibilities, right? Their services are directed, 4 to college and career, 2 to at risk. And so their maybe daily work looks a little bit different, but when you take a step back and look at how many counselors we have for our district and students, it's just interesting to look at the macro level view that way in terms of the ratio we hear, out there. So I'll pause there because I think there's discussion or questions on this one as well.
And who wants to go first?
Mine's really fast. Is this the same way that the state calculates this ratio, right? You see this ratio all over, this district has X numbers to 1, right, for adults on campus, for example. Is this the same way that the state calculates it?
I would ask Mike, are you including college and career counselors?
I am.
Then no. Typically, what they'll do is they'll look at the school counselor to get that counseling number. And sadly, it's about 750-ish statewide, maybe 675 to 750. It's abhorrent, but that's typically only with the school counselors. Sometimes they do include this when they're looking at a counseling office for a different data point. But when the number I think you're looking for is that caseload number. Is that correct?
Right. So according to the state, then we're closer to like 300 to 1. Yeah, because we just take out those. Yeah. And this is a great number. I'm sorry.
Sure.
I was just wondering if somebody threw it.
I have it in my
Compare to
speaker
other
notes.
State numbers.
If you take out the 4 college and career, you can do it without the at-risk counselor, just the 12. What if you include that risk counselor? All of them, I think the most, it's like 376 if you.
And then I would like to know if it's well defined, at what point you have an academic one compared to an at-risk academic one. And how do those dovetail, or how do you get passed off from one group to the other, et cetera? And then also, is there a flow chart or whatever, how this flows into wellness services? If a counselor is the first contact of a student that has mental health, anxiety, other kind of needs that aren't strictly academic, where is kind of the to-do list or responsibility is of who, who covers what.
So I can first start off with the at-risk. The at-risk counselor teaches 3 classes. So they have a lower caseload because of the amount of time that they're out of the office. In addition, with their smaller caseload, which many of them are in the 3 classes that they teach, they have extensive outreach with the parents way more regularly than a student or a counselor who has the main caseloads. So they pull the at-risk into that's the 2 David Merkin and Jacob Lorraine at-risk counselors, and then all the other students are more or less divided amongst the rest of the counselors.
And my understanding is now you try to keep the person with the same counselor
That's always been the case.
through their whole career.
Yeah. Yep. So they're building the relationship, the families are building a relationship with the counselor. The counselor needs to write a letter of recommendation for the seniors.
Yeah.
So having them for 4 years allows them
Right.
to get to know those students so that they can write a strong
And then
letter.
it's a different slice of life, if you will, for the assistant principals, and who's in charge of them for other issues that dovetail in, like discipline and things like that.
There is a flow chart, if we can call that, but there's a key data table that shows who's the responsibilities between some of the folks that work with students in the tier 2 level, the academic counselors, the administrators. Yeah.
Yeah, because then that changes up some, because you have the person that's in charge of discipline for sophomores and then a different one for juniors or something.
Well, actually the administrators follows the same pattern as the counselors. And that is that at Mountain View, they follow them all 4 years. So if you're an admin of freshmen, then the next year you're sophomores and then juniors, seniors. And then at Los Altos, it's by alpha sort. And so they always have the S through Z. For the very same
Yeah,
reason,
for the
you want to get
alphabet,
to
yeah,
know your
okay.
students, you want to, yeah.
But they do follow them, it's just, they have a different formula for following them.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I have a more basic question, I guess, getting back to the number we have and is it the appropriate amount that we have and should we be adding more, which costs money, right? So I think I was reading a little bit about it and I think they say a good number is 250 to 1 in somewhere I read that, and 350 was more like or 450 I think was like the national average. So the recommendation, yeah. So do you know what historically how the caseload for our counselors has grown over the years? I mean, when my kids were there, I believe it was more of a 200 to 1 ratio. And is there any way to get some of that data from like maybe Marty McGurk or someone who's been around here can say back in 2004 our ratio was 200 to 1. We continue to grow and maybe we should be adding more counselors is the question.
So I'm going to go first. The contract actually targets a ratio of 400 to 1, the DTA contract, I believe. And if it's not in the contract, it was in the historic staffing formula allocation for how to allocate how many counselors. In fact, I remember when Mountain View had a part-time counselor because it was, the formula 400 to 1 generated 5.4 counselors, right? And then if you wanted to make a whole one, the principal had to use some of that allocation of people to make that person whole. So yeah, I'd be curious to know if it was ever as low as the numbers you're referring to. That's not my recollection.
I don't think we've ever had 400 to 1.
No, I don't, because it's always usually been allocated that way, but then usually, that it didn't create a whole position. So you'd round up to get another person and that would, lower that ratio number. And the at-risk counselor was added initially, didn't have a caseload because the thought was, you want all the counselors to deal with all the kids, and the at-risk one truly was like this additional support. And then as enrollment grew, there was a need to have them pick up a caseload to help spread it out amongst other counselors. So, but it's historical data we could get. I mean, we could easily see how many counselors we had and what was the enrollment and do a math problem.
That's just
and
what
find
I was
out.
thinking, I just, if we're looking at the budget right now, I would like to know if we're doing, 250 to 1 or whatever it is the right amount that we want for our students. And I remember thinking that of all the districts around us, we had one of the best ratios that I can recall from way back when. And I just hope that we're continuing to be able to offer the service that we had in the past to the students now, even though we have increased enrollment.
Sure.
So, Phil, that's great. So a couple of questions. So I guess to piggyback a little bit on Debbie's question. So the 251, how does that align with our neighboring high school districts? Do we know?
I do not, but we could certainly investigate that.
Okay, I'm just curious to know what that is. If we're kind of in line or in the ballpark with that. And so I guess it was interesting that you mentioned that DTA contract is more like 400 to 1. So I assume that they're not requesting more counselors, right? They're not saying, hey, we need to reduce the ratio. It's not coming, we're not getting it from the counselors that they'd like to see, a smaller ratio.
There has been no request for a reduction in counselor caseload. And as far as the comps, we will pull them. But my understanding of the comps is that we are well below the average.
And so one request I've heard from parents a lot, and I'm one of them, is that for many of our students that are I would say maybe they are the more successful academic students. They would like to have a stronger engagement with their counselors to help them get into, top universities. They're reach colleges. And those reach colleges doesn't have to always be Harvard, Stanford, MIT. The reach has now become a very much bigger set of colleges. But they need more guidance and help to be able to do that and understand what's out there to compete with the other students in the Bay Area, and they don't necessarily get that support from the counselor, because the counselors like that, they're loaded to 250. They have a lot of other students that they're, and I think for a lot of them, maybe the focus is on the critical learners, making sure that they are able to take the courses that they need to graduate, they do well in those courses with all the stuff that's needed, and that's completely understandable. So, I guess I'd like to see if there's any possibility to be able to help these other students as well, to do that. Because a lot of them, I'm sure families will hire outside help to help those students, but there's some students that may not have the means to be able to do that. They're still good students, they're strong students, but they may not have the resources either, right, to be able to. But they would like to get the guidance. How can they, put a better resume together and be able to compete to get into those, those reach colleges.
I think that's a great point. And my first check-in with the student would be if they're accessing the College and Career Center, where we have 2 full-time licensed college counselors that actually have experience in the college admission, college application review process. They do workshops during lunches, they have drop-ins, they have appointments, they do personal counseling, they do coaching, they meet with families. 9th grade through 12th grade, they push into classes to even promote themselves to students. So I would really encourage first that we access our College and Career Center, because everything that you're saying resonates with this wonderful webinar that they did yesterday, and that is their cup of tea.
Yeah. So I think a lot of them do. I think most of them all do. They access the College and Career Center. They use it as much as possible. But some of them need that, individual guidance of what exactly for their specific needs are, and that's where they need that. So I think the College Career Centers are great, and I think they do a great job. I just, again, there's, we have 4 college and career counselors for all the students, and that's, there's a lot of students. So I think, I guess maybe we need to assess how much of a need that is, and maybe that's a survey we would need to do with families to understand if that is something that we do need. But from my experience, it is something that we would need just from seeing my own child go through the district here.
I just wanted to add that we did run the college and career access to workshops and individualized summer appointments the last 2 summers. The foundation also contributed to that. We believe it was widely advertised. It was another opportunity for people, especially not during the school year, to make an appointment with the college and career counselor and not only have that individual appointment, but there were other workshops. There was essay writing, one-on-one, like individual help with essay prompts. And then also they did, the word's going to escape me, presentations where colleges came and presented. So we're hoping to continue with that program, but just in order to address some of that, because during the school year can be quite a lot. So to be able to do this early. Yeah.
Fiona, you had something to.
Yeah, I think Mountain View has followed suit, but when Angela Price first came to Los Altos, she was not taking no for an answer. I mean, every single senior had to meet with her individually to figure out, where are you going? What do you want to do? What's the plan? How do I help you? And she was not taking no. And I know that she takes the seniors and, I forgot.
Laura.
Thank you. And Laura takes the juniors at Los Altos, and they don't take no for an answer. Everybody has to come in and meet with them. I don't know specifically what the Mountain View team is doing. But I do know that at Los Altos, they have taken that on very personally to say, I'm going to get you where you need to go. And if you don't come see me, I'm going to send you a slip to make you come see me. So anyway, just an FYI on that. Yeah, but again, I don't know specifically what Mountain View's
It's
model
good, I'm
is.
glad you,
Yeah.
I can't say that was, so, my experience is more with Mountain View, so like Mountain View, I can't say they've done it, my son's a junior, so that hasn't happened. I would think it'd be junior year, right, that's where they have to really, otherwise, senior is kind of too late, right, by the time they're seniors, right, so they need it in junior year, so, okay. Yeah, no, it'd be good if that's something that could happen at both schools.
Okay, I think we need to move on. And then, and we have these additional research and data points that we'd like to have from staff later. Mike, do you want to move on to?
Yeah, well, and I appreciate the conversation too, because it's really getting at the services we're providing kids and looking at our existing resources and, are we utilizing the right way, or maybe there's a way to use the same resources but in a different way to provide the services we want, and acknowledging, what is this, the second year I think we've had the full 2 credentialed counselors in college and career, right? So some of what you've seen in recent years is in response to different initiatives and needs.
We've doubled that then. We've doubled the.
It wasn't that long ago where it was only a classified person. So, all right. Highlighting professional development, right? Just the investment in our staff. Primarily.
Mike, I just wanted to say one thing. Thank you for presenting it in this way, actually. And I haven't been to too many of these because I've not been on the board as long. But I like not just the numbers, folks. It's broken out by these categories where we can have a little bit of a deeper understanding of that part of the function of the organization.
Great.
I like it. So thank you for that part. It's not as, we want some more details from you, but this is a great way to give us an overview of these things.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Because really the budget is about aligning resources with our goals and our initiatives. And so it's really hard and maybe even wrong to talk about the numbers without talking about the programs and the services we're trying to provide kids and the best use of that. So professional development, you can see the number. There's several different categories and ways we fund that. Some is general fund like Curriculum Institute and the Learning Palooza. Title II is federal money. The Educator Effectiveness Grant is recent state money. The number I have up there in blue is an annual amount. So we took the 5-year annual average of the Educator Effectiveness Grant, as well as acknowledging and noting the instructional support team and their role in really providing support for teachers. And that's the full cost of those 4 positions. They do more than just specific professional development, but I think that's a great area and category in which they support.
The question there, though, is that is not our rate of expenditure for a given person. 4 full-time people would cost more than that.
No, that's all in.
That's not counting the overhead and the.
It's counting their salary
Okay.
and all their benefit costs. It is. Yeah, it doesn't
Okay.
count Terry's time overseeing them
you
or.
usually put them at about 250 is how you calculate? teachers?
No, the average is about 168 or 170,
Okay,
but that's based upon 10 years of service or 12 and,
okay, so approximately 170.
you know,
-ish.
so
You just-
without naming names, many of these folks in these positions naturally are more veteran teachers that are farther along in the salary schedule, so they're going to be a higher cost. Mhm. Transportation is one, and this was actually added more recently. I think after this was posted, but just acknowledging, because we don't have a transportation department and I'm not asking for one. However, we do provide funding for transportation. You know, we have for many, many years, I don't know how I'm going back how far, but bus passes using VTA for our low income students. Athletics, this is a net number. This is really the net district funding contribution to athletic after school transportation. We do ask for money from athletes to offset this cost. So the total out the door cost is higher, but it's offset by money that comes in from those students. And then special education, we're part of a transportation JPA. Many districts in the area, we do this to pool the costs and routing of transportation. We do not charge this specifically to special ed funds. So this is in addition to and outside of the other special ed monies we're talking about. But this is the amount we pay to JPA, as well as there are some individual agreements to provide transportation for students. So just trying to highlight what is being spent in the realm of transportation, even without the transportation department.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm going to step away. Just let you know. So I'll be
Right.
back.
Note that Sanjay needs to step out for a few minutes and then he'll be back in our meeting and he will catch up by listening to the recording later. So you might have missed. Thank you. I'm
We
sorry,
can
CJ.
note, we're now at district office department.
Okay,
But
Yep.
So one of the things I've heard a couple of times is that possibly our district maybe should provide some additional busing.
Mhm.
That we have some students that, you know, doing VTA and having jobs on the side and doing all this stuff has made it so that unfortunately it's difficult for them to get to school.
Mhm.
And I don't know, Nellie, if this is something we can look into and maybe including for different ways or something, but I do feel for these students that are going, you know, just can't make it. And I think in one particular case, somebody had to move to remote learning because they couldn't make it to campus. So if we have money in our budget, and this is an area that I think I would be interested in possibly looking at a way that we could provide some more transportation.
I can say, when we did student voice groups, we heard the same thing. The positive news is that starting the EL program at Los Altos High School will help some of the students you're speaking about. But there were students at Alta Vista who said it took over 45 minutes one way to go to campus. Given the design of the district, the size, and if you live on the far, and Mike and I had this conversation, Mountain View's at the far end of the area of the zone. But that being said, Terry's done extensive work looking at transportation, and we can bring more information back to you, and we'll put it on our list of things, because there are students, and typically they're students in poverty who are impacted negatively. Now, whether it's a van, a small bus, we can look at it because it's a small number, but it impacts them greatly.
Right.
So we can look at that.
I know personally, because I've actually given a ride to somebody,
Yeah.
you know, back when my kids were here, and I've driven them way over my shoreline, and it's a
Right.
long way, and they were gonna take buses to buses, and I'm just saying, you know,
Yes.
you get down to soccer practice and their kid's friend or something, I'll just start driving. But I think that, you know, looking at the budget, and if they're at the end, when we look at the surplus money that we possibly have, that this is an area that I think maybe for some not too expensive cost, I don't know what it would be, but okay.
One of the reasons we put the slide on here was it's an important subset of students that are disproportionately impacted
And
by not having a ride.
Terry's looked at it as it pertained to the EL and where students live, and looking at some different routing options. We've even looked at, I know the Mountain View Community Shuttle actually has expanded hours. Unfortunately, it doesn't go right where we want it to do in terms of the school. But you know, that used to, I think, not start running till 9 or 10 in the morning, and there was additional funding. I was told by city staff that would start earlier, like at 7 or 8. I can't remember, Terry, I think we were both on that. that doesn't solve it all, but it's probably multiple, things to help those students and making sure they're aware of some of those options. And I'll put out a plug, anyone listening, right? We would love to hire some bus drivers. We have 2 buses that don't get used for after school transportation as much as they could be. So then we have to contract with other agencies, often charter buses that, we would be happy to drive them, but it's become hard to find drivers that have the appropriate licensing credential, because it's more than a charter bus driver is one license, a school bus driver, there's a whole nother level, and finding them that works. It's just been a challenge. We've been looking, I think, Layla, since she first got here, we looked at, can we create a new position and carve it out this way and mesh it with something else, or, and it's that classic challenge of, is it home to school or is it after school sports, or what is it, and how they're utilizing their full day when the buses are on the road only for a certain portion. So
It's another
We're open.
opportunity to possibly partner with cities as well, because they have the buses, they have the staff, and some other cities that I've seen, they'll have one shuttle that aligns with school hours on purpose, and it's typically all students, like right up and down.
Right.
So,
Well, I know even with speaking to the cities, like the route of the VTA buses can actually be possibly adjusted.
exactly.
We could go speak to the city of Los Altos or Mountain View, and maybe, especially over here with areas that are congested. I'm not sure, but there are areas we might want to look into.
And there's also been some rumbling at the state and or federal level of with the advent of feeding everyone and everything, that maybe there should be more things done towards transportation of children too. So who knows if we would ever get any money or things for that.
All right, and then we're in the early stages of at the, say, district level and department level, looking at those, I'll call more discretionary budgets. These are areas within the district office and our various departments. It does not include the people cost, right? That's a whole other number, in terms of the staffing and the appropriate size given the departments, but just kind of gives you a sense of the dollars for materials, supplies, services, what it might be for, supporting the board and the superintendent's office, even with conferences, CSBA membership fees, board meeting related things, as well as, personnel at services, business services, right? And some of this gets rolled up to, and we have agreements with the County Office of Ed for certain support services, in particular with Ed services. We pay fingerprinting services, right, in personnel. We have to pay for bits of support, which is under personnel. Document report creation, document tracking services for the various reports that Ed services produce that helps that. So just trying to give some representation of what some of those costs might be without listing every single one. But just gives you a sense, and that's something that the 4 of us have started to look at and how do we then determine and right size that or adjust it as necessary, or maybe it is the right size. So just give me
I just have to say, this is an exciting project for me as we start to reorganize and put the funding and the budgets under the respective managers so they can monitor and make decisions. So this is kind of based on last year. And as we start to build, for example, under Ed services, you would build in wellness and special ed, and then under business, food and transportation, which you've already done. But we're very excited to see about how this can align to our district and board goals. So excited about it.
I'm a little surprised. It looks like business services is maybe under, but
I know.
all the software that you guys have to use, all the computers that have to be up to date. At any rate, I wouldn't.
So
I'm not-
technology isn't on here. It's kind of like wellness, isn't? This, I think, is just
Fair enough.
exactly
No,
what
but,
the department used
Okay.
last year.
Okay,
So it's the
interesting.
base.
It's just much lower than I would have
Well, and
expected.
some of it, right, becomes a
Paper
understood,
supplies.
and you're right, technology is not a part of it, food service not a part of it. Like in Terry's realm, like Curriculum Institute on a prior slide, all that professional development is kind of under that umbrella, right, but not specific department. So, and some of it becomes a, I don't want to say arbitrary decision, but where do you account for it, right? Is this a software that supports all departments in the entire district, or is this specific to one department, right? So you know, some
And
of
the
that stuff then
interesting thing-
becomes
Oh,
put
sorry.
elsewhere. No, I'm sorry.
About this as a start is that it's kind of interesting how general fund though is all under business. So it's not pushed out to the departments, and that's what Mike and we all have been working on, is to do that. So would you say this kind of includes paper and,
Yeah, new
System.
computer replenishment, right?
you know, ours is like
Mhm,
CSBA and it's
Mhm.
really minimal for now. But yeah,
mhm.
you're right, that's.
Well, and like
well.
personnel, for instance, has, right, part of this is the staff recognition, retirement, you know,
Uh-huh.
the things that go along with that. So there's a little more of those events or type of category things that, you know, don't fall to business services. We can operate in the background, and yet there's large things, right, that support all of it, right? But like analytic, that software that might be, you know, 30,000 a year. Well, that's a HR primarily, but it drives the budget because people is the budget. So we don't really get down to the nitty gritty of, well, 60% of that cost is assigned to personnel and that.
No,
So
and
that might be
love
some of
this
the
idea.
variance.
I'm just looking at ed services and personnel being sort of loosely, at least in
Sure.
the same ballpark. And
Yeah.
and I was like, huh.
I know.
Anyway,
It
that's all.
looks funny.
I like this approach. This is a really,
Yeah.
it's a really nice approach.
It's interesting. I was wondering if you were feeling bad that nobody liked you as well. in your business.
I always say
I'm
budget
teasing.
has all the
That's
money,
okay.
but it's really
Mhm.
our role to spend it.
Yeah.
So.
I get to see all the categories, so
Yeah,
yeah.
Mike.
Yeah. All right. I don't see Phil on my screen, but that may just be he took his camera off and I'm hiding non-video participants, so Debbie's not on it. So
Oh, okay.
Debbie can confirm this. Phil, oh, there he
There's
is.
Phil.
Oh, see, because I
Hi,
said
Phil.
something, he put
Still
himself
there.
back
Good.
on. It's all right, Phil. You
All
can,
right.
if you need to turn it off, don't worry.
Oh, wait, we're to initiatives now?
Yeah, so these next few slides, because we didn't want to make the font so small, it's only on one slide, is looking at the initiatives and highlighting the things we've already implemented or in the process of implementing. And Layla gets a lot of credit for this, of capturing some of this that has been born out of multiple conversations, board discussions, you know, input, feedback. And so I will spare us reading them all, but we broke them down in categories. So you see the wellness thing. Some of these we already spoke of earlier. Some of it is, you know, software like the I'm Sparked, Check, maintain services, but it came with a significant increased cost. We spent a lot of time looking at those, what we call here in-house positions.
Okay, so I chime in then?
Yeah.
So I'm still on line with thinking about money and how to spend it and how to make everything better. Two things that I want us to think about, and I'm not saying we do it, just throwing them out there if for future, if there's a need. And one is a wellness center staff member for our wellness centers that are coming to fruition in the next couple of years when we finish the buildings. I think we're kind of tossed around some of this yesterday during our wellness meeting. And I don't know if it's something we want, but it's just something that I wanted to throw out there that we could think about doing. Another one is school nurses. So those are just two additional, you know, people that we may want to hire. And I'm not saying we need to, I'm just saying that we can put it on the list of possible ones if anybody else is interested or if there's a need for it.
Yeah. El Camino is always a good partner for the nurses, and I feel like they're. Sorry, you guys all have the most direct interaction with them, but when I have spoken with board members for them, they are always willing to hear additional ask, and they can say no, but they're always willing to hear additional ideas for how to support us. So if that's something that we think we need, if that's something that we decided that we needed, they wouldn't be offended by the ask, is I guess where I'm going, because they're always able to say no. But they also happen to be rather flush at the moment.
But they do have kind of a timing cycle for when you apply for certain kinds of monies from them. And so it's nice to fit into that rather than miss. It's harder to get the money after the fact if you miss one of their kind of ask deadlines.
Right, and part of what this helps too is think too, like I hear, you know, school nurses and I hear El Camino, and I also think of, oh, we do contract some nursing services for our special ed students. Right now, it's a specific need, right? But hey, is there this overlap or nexus or, you know, kind of looking at the more macro level view of, okay, you know, what are we trying to do, right? And then how do we match that with the resources in person and think of that. So that's all very helpful and allows us to kind of think about other things going on and capitalize on that.
right?
Mhm.
I know our feeder schools have them. So that's just one point of reference. And
Okay.
again, I don't actually know what they all do, but I can imagine some of the things that they could do to take the offload of our assistant principals or our counselors. So I'll just end it at that. I just wanted
Sure.
to put two ideas in place if there's money and a need.
And thank you. We're taking notes and we're going to meet tomorrow and we're going to go through some of this. And this is exactly why we wanted to have this workshop.
I have to say, I'm on the nurse plan too. I like the idea of having a nurse. And I also like the idea of having some sort of support for the wellness centers, although a lot of nurses in districts rotate through different schools. So it doesn't need, we mean two or three. We don't need that many. Maybe we need, or the same with the wellness. There could be afternoon wellness at one school and morning at the other, something like that. So, there could be somebody, if there's a need for that sort of thing.
And we haven't really delved deeply into the special education budget this time, but we do have a lot of contracted nursing services within that budget as well.
Some of their IEPs are there.
Oh, it's
Yep.
usually tied completely to an IEP.
And well, I mean, require one-on-one nurse at all times. Some of them.
Most of those students, I believe we have at other campuses and in non-publics,
Oh, okay.
but certainly in other districts, that is the case.
On this slide, you see many academic supports that are identified, right? And a fair amount of it is additional staff to support special education and our EL students, many additional classified instructional assistants as well. Coming back to in-person, continuing to provide opportunities and financial compensation to cover for other classes, to attract subs, continued option B, right? That kind of flexibility for students. So a lot of that's going on here as well as mentioned, but upgrading the college and career centers, what those looked like before, to two full certificated positions, and then the summer work they're doing, for which the foundation and the district partner to provide compensation for work during the summer for those folks to work with students.
Sorry again. This is kind of a general question about all of the budget, but there are items that are directly funded from the money that we're getting because of COVID relief, basically, right? So it'd be interesting. I'm interested to know what the list is and what we will lose when it goes away, because some of it we're looking at now. We're hiring like an extra therapist, and maybe it's covered under the COVID funding. So I kind of want to know what we have now that's personnel supplying services that when the COVID funding goes away, we will lose that position or that program or whatever. And is there a list of that?
The later slide decks is all about COVID. It's not listed out line by that, but I have the spreadsheet that backs it up that I could pretty easily provide that for.
Because I think going forward, those are programs for people, that we may want to retain, that will cost us money out of our budget, that won't be supplemented in the future.
Yeah.
And it'd be nice to identify which one of them are key and that we think we'll need even when the money is gone.
Sure.
This would be an amazing document, actually, particularly as we look at, meeting and advocating for the current budget, because the budget's not done. And just the problem with one-time money, this ties into everything as far as presenting somebody, Becker, we just met with Becker yesterday, who doesn't understand education at all and has publicly said, I'm going to do these things over here and I support education, but I'm not going to be the deep dive education guy. But to be able to put something like that in front of him to say, okay, this is what we have now, and we won't have it because it's one-time money, and this is all really good stuff for kids. So anyway, that would be amazing, right? And I don't mean to heap, a 40-hour week of work on you, Mike, with all the follow-up. But if it is in a spreadsheet already, that would be.
And I think that would even include, like, just as an example, the lunch, the free lunch. That's to the level that I kind of would like to see it, because we're keeping kids on campus now, and things are changing the dynamics of the environment that we're in because kids are on campus.
Yep.
And maybe we want to fund that. So that's to the level if we could go that deep.
So you're suggesting also to include also other budgets, so like the county support that may go away and the universal lunch that may go away.
Right. Anything that is temporary that we now are relying on to support our students. And
There's no,
staff,
there's
that-
no
that-
guarantee those are
that
staying.
it might go away, and that we should be able to see that list, because it's gonna be like having all of a sudden, a budget meeting where we're making cuts. I don't want to make cuts. I want to be proactive and see what they are now and say, hey, we need to roll this in or get that money in the future to allocate it for it.
Okay.
Okay.
So, but none of these listed here are part of that one-time money? Or
No,
of
some
them?
are.
Yeah.
Oh,
mean,
well,
option-
I'd
pretty
like to
much-
see a star at least.
Pretty
by
much
them
all of
then.
option B, right? I mean, just when you look at how we're utilizing our funding, and part of this is strategic to
Yes.
use
But,
it.
well, I
Is that
thought
for the
I
increased
didn't
rate?
know that, well, we're paying for it that way, but we were we were planning on continuing it anyway.
Right.
But yeah,
Definitely.
that's,
Oh, I
so that's
see
the
what you're
thing,
saying.
it's like, we would keep it, we're keeping it, but we
But-
have to pay out of our own side of the money bucket, or
But we
whatever.
might need to adjust
Yeah.
adjust it down. So that's, I
Yeah.
mean, that's always a consideration
Yeah.
if it's funded differently.
Yeah,
But
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think we need to have Mike identify them all right now. I think.
No,
we
no,
can
That's
no,
talk
fine.
we can
about
do
that.
definitely not,
later.
Okay.
definitely not, but I do have one
Trying to
question.
impress you all, but no, it's okay.
One
just
question
teasing.
there is that 12 additional classroom assistants, would those be one of the things that go away? And how much is that amount of money approximately? And is that in your sped budget already?
That's
that-
multiple
Or is that in a
questions,
different
Catherine, that
category?
Those are
we'll
different-
both answer.
different
Go ahead.
questions.
I think we budgeted when we met, this is last summer, about 1.2 million in additional costs with this item. A lot of it, we have a plan. A lot of it is, and again, we can dig as much as you would like, but at this time, but a lot of it is regarding IEPs that come to us, and a lot about our vision for least restrictive environment and working with students and their families to ensure that students truly have the least
No,
restrictive
I'm not
environment.
complaining about having them. I just wanted to be reminded how much they cost.
Well,
And if that bucket of money is already in that sped part that we saw earlier, or that's being paid for with COVID funds, or what?
So yes, and yes. Here's the dollar number. 300, it's about 300,000, 311,000 that came from the Expanded Learning Opportunity Grant, the ELO grant. It's 10% as the law is required to be spent on paraprofessionals, which we refer to as instructional assistants. So at a minimum, $300,000 worth of this cost is being funded out of that, because that's the appropriate use of those funds. And as Layla, pointed out, a lot of the IAs, of which we have quite a few of them, this number, I'd say, is pretty volatile or fluctuates year to year based upon IEP needs. We also see, I would say, you would know better, but a higher rate of turnover amongst some of these where they're leaving. Sometimes they move and become a teacher, right? So it vacates that position. Sometimes they move from one classification to another, like they're a regular classroom IA and become a one-to-one, and it creates a vacancy. So part of the plan is we know we need to have them based on those needs, but as we look at the services we're providing and how we're delivering those services, right? Do you need, a couple classroom IAs instead of multiple one-to-ones, or vice versa? That number can be adjusted based upon the changing nature of the program. And then students do graduate, and sometimes they're not needed, and the IA is reassigned, or you don't need a new one.
So can I ask a question about the sub rate?
Yeah.
So what was the sub rate 3 years ago? Was it 180, 100?
It was.
180.
And now we're up to 250?
correct.
So 3 years from now, is it still at 250?
No, so we did a temporary approval when you recently approved. So we've done 2 increments. We went from 180 to 225, then we went 225 to 250. This is all surrounding districts doing this in order to stay competitive due to pandemic conditions. So we will reevaluate, and I think we will recalibrate. I think, the market was hot right now and this was necessary, but another temporary item to that same point is the $160 coverage. That again is a temporary agreement. And again, with the temporary money, we have been mindful to not make permanent agreements with temporary money in these regards. Yeah.
Layla, could you share how we've had cohorts that stay on campus, whether we have vacancies or not?
Yes, that was another initiative, also temporary funding funded this, and this was our concept, which is not necessarily a bad concept for normal times, but it was, you know, larger than you would normally do, but resident substitutes who are with you every day, guaranteed. So we never had a problem utilizing them, but you know, there are gaps in their day or kind of iffy periods where they haven't been dispatched to a classroom, but you just eat the cost because you need them to be here because we need the commitment. We may continue the concept, but really scale it back. I mean, one per school site for like years out if we are not dealing with these pandemic
I
conditions.
think in that grand scheme of thing list too, maybe another page could be all these little creative things, like how much does a teacher get to cover a class? I mean, we've all extending money that way too right now, which is one time money.
That's the one.
Yeah.
There-
That's the 160.
And it used to be a
I thought it
lower
was
rate
actually
during normal
Much
times.
lower rate.
No.
So,
We are
okay,
too.
sorry, we
We are
combined
doing that.
several things
Yeah.
in the answer.
Yeah.
So there's the resident
Right,
substitutes,
resident substitutes.
there's the increased substitute rate in general, and then there's the increased coverage rate for those teachers, because again, we didn't just patch all this together, and it wouldn't actually be fiscally responsible to patch everything together with a substitute. Sometimes we just need to staff periods. And so, but there was an incentive for the teachers to pick up the classes with this increased coverage rate, which will expire.
Okay, I get it.
And what was the increased coverage rate before?
160.
Oh, 160,
No,
before.
the prior,
65?
yeah, I'll have to get all these
But,
rates.
I know.
Sheet, I will get my rate sheet, but it's
There's-
low.
The
There's,
regular one was less than 100
oh,
by
yes.
far, and now we basically upped it almost
Correct.
$100 for any given period, which is a pretty
And
good
We
rate.
didn't up it just
Temporarily. Very good.
for your information, you know, I know everyone is trusting in the process, but we didn't up it preemptively. We were having a problem with the coverage, and then once we upped it, the problem was solved. And the rate was established through negotiations during the pandemic. And so we reverted to the pandemic rate for this period of time, and we will reevaluate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Is everybody okay?
I have a
with that
rate
one?
sheet. I will send the
She
link.
does.
Yeah.
I refer to it quite a bit because we
Alright.
get it in payroll.
So we'll go to this one now, the supports for schools and districts.
So again, this outlines other different initiatives and things completed or in progress, from the website upgrade to, we were talking about subs, but sub management and COVID response, right? So our COVID designee team, and we moved some folks around, in particular, you know, somebody from technology to help support the COVID team. So there was costs associated with that, additional summer school offerings, especially looking ahead to 2022 and looking at, you know, the administrators for that, as well as different strands. Other positions are there, you know, and then as we already talked about, universal meals, right? Now we're getting federal reimbursement for that, which is great, but that's, you know, you mentioned earlier, Debbie, about what that means on campus, and it's changed the nature and having more kids on campus, and what does that entail, but as well as what does that mean for our food service staff and our custodians who have to clean up afterwards. And it's fantastic, but it's really a game changer, and looking at facilities that were never designed to feed 1,100 or 1,200 students, which is about how many meals we continue to serve. So a lot of great things on this list. Really to try and achieve those goals, and the district, you know, initiatives and goals we're working towards.
Maybe we're getting tired.
That's my teacher wait time. That's okay.
One-time funding
Yeah.
money, so.
Yeah, that's. thing.
Quick question, I'm just, apologies, I'm just seeing the summer school note for 22. That's a plan for this summer, that's being
Yes.
added. That's fabulous. That's
Yes.
wonderful. Thank you.
Yes, and will that be
Thank
one-time
you.
fund? No?
Well, that's been.
Yes
needed
and
for a
yes.
Yes,
while.
and yeah. Yes, and.
I mean, we have an annual summer school budget, so part of this, right, is in the budget world, right, we don't want to budget ongoing expenses. Even when we look at reallocating folks in the COVID team, all right, are they going to go back to somewhere else? And we want to be very thoughtful about what funds we're using to pay for that, right? To not jeopardize the district's finances going forward. So summer school, yes, sometimes there's an increased cost to use something new and a new initiative, or you want to try it out so we can use those one-time funds. But of course, we're going to have that annual cost of it, and we want to make sure that continues to be budgeted appropriately. So it's a yes and a yes, really. Some of both.
Right.
And then, of course, we're already looking ahead, and some of this has been shared at prior meetings, but ELD program at Los Altos, looking at that. You know, a lot of the conversation today, at least as I've heard, is aligning the staffing to match the program needs and the services the students need. And what does that look like? You know, maybe we have the right number of people, but utilizing it a different way, for example, right? Or look at what they're currently doing versus what outcomes do we really want to see. On the enhanced website, communication tools, options for students. I know option B, what does that look like, say, going into the future, right? As we're
I want to know, Dr. Meyer, does CTE and go with the support, or that's not support, that's new program?
Correct.
But we would be looking at that too.
We would.
And continue more program options for students.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
I actually have a question in that bucket too. Sorry, I didn't want to.
No, it's fine.
I was at a little sidebar with Layla there.
I saw somewhere.
Yeah, good.
Specifically under aligned staffing to match program needs, as we build CTE, and Nellie knows that this is on my brain because she was with me, but we were talking with Stephen Hine at Los Altos, and just the problem exists that we have amazing equipment that can't be maintained. And I know you already know, Terry, and I know that folks have been trying to fill a position, but it does remind me also about our lab tech for science, that I don't know if that ever got filled after that person left, because Foundation was paying for it, and it did get filled.
Okay,
Yay. And
good.
I know how appreciative science was of that, but it doesn't make any sense to build amazing CTE programs and then not figure out how to maintain the equipment. So I would love to see and it fits right in here, right? It fits right into match the program needs, because we have to, that's an equivalent investment with our CTE is the people and the equipment. So I would just love to figure out how to get that filled, and they can, they can share a person across the campuses if that's enough time, so they could share an FTE, or if we need to, because the programs are really growing. Anyway, everybody's nodding their heads.
It's a good example at looking at what kind of staffing we need to make sure each program is successful. So EL, CTE, AVID, AP, you hear tutoring. So there are certainly things that we've been looking at that do that. There are also within grants that support CTE funding that can be used very flexibly to your point, because teachers aren't necessarily the ones who know how to fix the equipment. So you need both. So we are definitely looking at that. I also, just in summary, wanted to share that a lot of these initiatives that you saw I would say they were born kind of creatively through COVID crisis. And, some of the best things come from a period of crisis. But the other large portion of what we've been moving forward with are based on conversations we've had either in retreats or with the board or within our team to look at how to serve students. So we hope you saw, your ideas reflected in what we put to paper, but we're also collecting them today to really look at it. And CTE, I know we're going to have a presentation in a future meeting. There's so much potential for accelerating our critical learners, our high achievers through these programs. So it will be something that we bring back in conjunction with a report on our CTIG monies, which are separate, and that grant. So real exciting stuff coming ahead with that.
You're also looking into pathways too, and adding courses in pathways, right?
Yes, and pathways, it depends on honestly what district you're in, what you call what, it's like collaborative groups, PLCs, pathways. So CTE to me are pathways where you have the same cohort of students, 10, 11, 12, take progressively more difficult courses, as you know. But when you're saying pathways, I'm hearing also you're looking at within a content subject, different ways to get to San Francisco. So you can go, I don't know the freeways around here, sorry. We always say to get to LA, you can go
101,
15, you can go 5, you can go 10. And so tonight is math night. And I know, Terry, maybe you could add that, answer the question about how we're looking at different ways to, within a department, give options for students to take different pathways towards their mastery of content subject.
Yeah, thank you. So we are looking at the CTE standards and what industry pathways that we can have certified by the state, which means then the student is able to, they're pursuing certification through the CTE pathway standards that the class has to be aligned to. So right now we have pathways in our engineering and our arts and our culinary, and we're looking to expand within those, but then also offering in a law, in medical, we're looking at the health as well as the bio. So a pathway typically needs to have a capstone and a connector course, maybe an introductory, although that's not needed. So right now, and each of those has to have a CTE credential teacher, which means that teacher has to have a CTE credential, but they also have to have experience in that industry. And a lot of our current teachers either haven't been in industry or have not been in industry for a long time. And so that's one of our limitations that we're finding as we're looking at the pathways, and then we're looking at our current staff is who has the potential to be CTE credentialed, and that number is a little on the low side.
Right. So Terry, could you also share the articulated path instead of maybe pathway for like mathematics, where it may go like this?
Oh, sure.
Both are called pathways.
So not CTE related in that case.
Right.
Correct me if I'm missing the prompt. So as an example, algebra to geometry to algebra 2 to AP stats or AP Calc BC, algebra to geometry to data science to AP computer science or AP stats. Is that what you're?
Yes, and that's part of a proposal right now. Is that correct?
Yep.
Was that your part of
Yeah,
your question?
that was, and it also brings up another thing that is that maybe as a board in the future, we should look at what our graduation requirements are that were set in 2014.
Yeah.
And that could be a good discussion that aligns with these pathways like math.
Yeah.
And, it doesn't have to be, we may have to introduce more types of classes that all students can take if we increase or whatever we do.
Yeah,
But I'm
and
just saying-
computer science, AP computer science is now considered a math credit. So
You only need 2 years to graduate
currently.
Yeah. Anyways, I don't want to bring, I'm really going off subject of the budget, but
Well,
if
it's
we
not
could just add
totally
that
though,
too.
because, there may need to be a different supports or whatever to support changes in graduation requirements. But I have to go ahead and tell you that Dr. Meyer may thought I've been a broken record about looking at board policies and procedures ever since I met her after we hired her, is that when are we going to look at graduation requirements? When are we going to look at graduation requirements? And then of course, COVID got in the way. So combining this with new program outlooks, new CTE offerings, and all these different kinds of pathways is a perfect time to kind of start looking into it, I think.
Yeah, it tethers with ethnic studies as well. It's
Yes,
like
it does.
A freshman history
Yeah,
course.
so I think it's,
It tethers with all of that.
I think we might as well get on the ball in that part. All right. You have anything to say about COVID?
Nope. Nothing to say about COVID. There's a lot out there. Being sensitive to time and just refer to, I think most of this is self-explanatory. It's categorized the various funding sources, 8.5 million total. We did it year by year. Partly this was also a negotiation request too. So partly that's why it was categorized this way. To pull all the individual invoices and detail that way would have been very time intensive. So the first glance, what you see here is into the categories by which we have to account for it in our accounting code. So it's people, supplies, equipment, services, broken down by the 2 years. This slide is the summary, basically total we got, what we spent so far, what still remains, and we can spend all through next year, the bulk of these funds, even into September of 2024. And then when you're just like, well, what's in personnel or what's in, supplies? So these other slides give, I think, flesh out like what this stuff, includes, right? So when we say personnel costs, well, this is a lot of it, right? If you want to line by line, well, how much did the actual subs cost? That's going to take some more time, and we'll talk about towards what end, right? That would be helpful, but it gives you kind of what's behind all those numbers. Same thing, supplies and equipment, that includes all of these things. I didn't list how many computers we bought. It's a lot of them, right? But you get the idea. And then what services are. So services, a lot of the software licenses. We've done community outreach things. The Uplift Family Services was a year ago. So that was the social worker where we did contract with an agency. The fact we didn't contract with them again might indicate, how challenging or successful sometimes that can be depending upon who they provide. As well as CHAC's costs increased pretty significant this year to maintain the level of services, and so some of this money helps offset that cost as we determine what's what's the right services and what they can provide and where we go to seek that.
Just a ballpark. So we're getting $8.5 million total across the 3 years. How many state or federal reports are required to document the funding of this money or the spending of this money? Just a ballpark.
I'd say about 3 or 4 a year because like quarterly for almost each of these categories, like ESSER1, ESSER2, ESSER3, ELO.
Okay, so quarterly for each of these categories across. Okay, thank you. That gives me a number.
Yeah, the learning loss mitigation kind of roll up into one. But what gets more challenging, and now I'm getting really account geeky, sorry, is, the state will say, oh, here's the expanded learning opportunity. Oh, by the way, that's 3 different sources. So there's a federal money. So that's a report now that gets rolled into a different one, but there's some state money. So they say, we're giving you $3 million, but depending on where they're getting the money, it then generates reporting requirements. So
Sometimes retroactively, you're asked for things as well.
no, it's so 4 year per line quarterly. So,
Sorry, 16.
So
Well, but for a year.
times
line.
per
So
year.
If it's a 3-year spending program, right? That's where I got to.
Yes.
Thank you. That's all. I was just looking for.
I appreciate the question. Understood. Yes.
And it's frustrating from the state level, and that's what they don't understand.
Right, exactly.
Well, are there more questions on the COVID part? Sanjay?
Not necessarily the COVID part.
Okay. Is there more questions on any? We are at 5. I think Debbie's gonna have to scoot.
I went into the middle of the discussion on either. I just wanted to understand, were you discussing the math framework that the state, you weren't discussing that?
Yeah, not the framework.
We
were talking about different kind of pathways potentially and what we have now.
Okay.
And I guess it falls into math night tonight. What time is that again? Is that
7 o'clock.
okay?
Via Zoom.
Well, because the math framework is another pathway, right, that they're proposing for, to go to K through 12.
Yes.
So it's a pathway. So with regards to, so that, I guess, looking at the initiatives here, so have we looked at other costs associated with, in terms of, I guess maybe this is kind of COVID related, where, looking at equipment that would be needed to be able to, have better cameras for the teachers for their lessons, or any other type of instructional aids that would benefit them to be able to have if they needed to go teach online or be able to record their sessions to be able to do that. Have we looked at and work with maybe teachers on other options that could aid for them if in case we go through this again, which most likely will probably.
Yeah, well, from an equipment standpoint, I feel very confident where we're at. 2 things come to mind. One is upgrading and making sure teachers have, a laptop, a device as their main teaching tool, right, with a certain amount of RAM and memory and all that stuff. And I'll remind us all, because it was easy even for me to forget, when we did the return it in person, what was that, 8, 9 months ago, 10 months ago, these Poly Studio cameras, and I'm pointing at the one we're using here, we bought a significant number. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but to outfit in classrooms to use for teachers. High quality camera, microphone picks up sound, can track people if you want to use that software. So a lot of that exists. Some of that is not being used right now, right, as we're in person, but it's there available to access when need be. If there's additional tools, it's not something we've specifically, at least I've specifically looked into just yet.
So we have, so what you're concerned, we have what we think we need, what teachers would need. If we were to go to, if we were to basically go back to some type of just learning, what they need to record their classes. Because I mean, even like this camera, I looked at it, I can see that if I was a teacher, I would seem pretty far away, right? From the,
Sure.
from the camera.
Although I can zoom, I mean, I don't use the zoom feature on this much, but I can zoom in on you from that camera and it's much closer. And I can have preset positions where I can go camera 1, camera 2 type stuff. So it has some functionality that maybe we don't utilize in the board meeting, but okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I can like zoom in, right, on just the, now I'm playing around with it. Sorry, some of you are out, right? But no. Oops, sorry.
Goodness.
Now I'll pivot and back out. Sorry.
I
many
think it is
tools,
fair
too
to
many
say
toys for
that
Mike.
we do currently, but certainly if it's 3 years out, we do constantly look at replenishing and working with Bob in the tech department as far as new tools. I think he's very current and we're outfitted now for the near future.
Have we, and so for like, do we regularly ping each of the, look at what they think the needs are, what they would see as additional needs, whether including that the cores, department heads, the music department, support and all stuff in terms of what other needs they would, that they foresee that they'd like to be able to kind of wish list for them maybe.
I don't know if we
For you guys.
explicitly asked for that, but they all do get department budgets. And if they need additional past the budget, then they could go request it from the principal or from one of us, depending on what it is. But I would say it's probably been a while since we did the wish list for the department.
But I want to be thoughtful too on how we go about those things, right? Because I think it's always encouraged, how does this fit within our district goals and our initiatives and kind of the direction we're heading, right? So how do all those requests align with that stuff, right? And that's the lens through which, we look at it, the principal should look at it, right? Department coordinator. So, that's always needs to be done tactfully in terms of, hey, what are the needs, right? And the confident part I have, and this gets back to some of the site allocation, is like, sometimes if I hear like somebody needs a printer, I'm like, why am I being bothered with it? Just get the printer. Like, we're a district that can provide these pieces of equipment. Like, don't bother me with it, just take care of it, right? So, some of those requests, and we've gotten better at, I've worked with the principals as there's been turnover in administration too, like, here's the things to handle and let's just get it done, right? And then other times there's a request for this and it's like, well, that would be great. Let's unpack it a little bit. What's behind it? Who's going to benefit from it? We can do it, but should we do it? Is that secondary question sometimes too?
I'll just say, Sanjay, the innovation grant has been really helpful too for those innovative, I have an idea, but it's not ongoing. Yeah.
Okay. I guess one thing that just came to mind. So in terms of, so I know for we get that we have a deal with Google for Chromebooks. We don't have a deal with.
No, we have a deal with the foundation.
The foundation.
With the Chromebooks.
Have we looked at, instead of actual Chromebooks, but actually look at some type of like an iPad instead of that, because for students to be able to take notes writing wise, because there's the iPad, they're very advanced now where you can write down basically everything and basically from the print form. Because I think there's a lot of studies out there that writing is much better in terms of retention. When you write something down as opposed to typing. And so having an iPad, especially even for special ed kids, I think it could be good as well to do it instead of, there's also study that for special ed kids to, that writing and drawing stuff out would be better than actual typing. So is that something, I don't know what the budget would be for that, is that something we could pursue?
Yeah, I mean, so partly Bob's not here, so I'll put it back on the technology plan yet to be written. You know, so we do, when it's in the IP and required in some special ed classes, we already utilize iPads, right? We don't publicize it, we don't promote it, but
Sorry, where did you?
in special ed
Oh,
classes,
we do.
some
Okay. I
students
didn't know that. Okay.
get one per their IEP. Some classes, small, have class sets that are utilized, right? And there's certain apps or software loaded onto it. So I think that's good to put out there. I mean, yeah, part of it is a cost calculation, right? Chromebook, 250 to 300 bucks, right out the door with the management fee. And we can replenish, you know, versus an iPad cost. And then also, you know, I would want somebody to look at the trade-offs, right? Because I know for my own sake, right? I love an iPad, a touch screen, the pencil I can do things with, but then other times I want the keyboard and that functionality and what I can do. So there are some Chromebooks that are touchscreen Chromebooks, but they come with a higher cost. So, you know, it would just be a cost calculation, how many we're buying.
I'd like to be respectful of everybody's time that we said we would not go past 5, and now it's almost 5:15. That if there's any other more detailed questions, such as how, for instance, educational services evaluates technology that they would think would be useful in the classroom, and how IT evaluates upcoming technologies and melding of the two, or any other of those kind of more detailed questions that we could get answers back to people, we could send you emails and ask. But I wanted to thank you all for coming to the budget study session, and I think it was very informative to us. Do you think so?
Oh, yeah,
Y'all?
I do. Yes. really.
And so thank you so much, Bill. Thumbs up on it being amazing. Yes. Bill, do you have one last question?
If you want to have a question.
It's a comment and a concern. So I heard as we were going on, a lot of times board members would say, I would really like this, I would really like that. And I understand those things, and they were all good things. But I think we have to remember that the basic purpose we serve here is academic education. And I would hope that as we are thinking about how to spend whatever extra money we might have, that we look at the various departments and we look within them at the courses, and we ask, in what courses are students succeeding more, and in what courses are they not succeeding? And how can we spend money to improve the courses where they're not succeeding as much? So that's my only thought on that. Thank you.
And Fiona, you have one last word?
No, you got covered. I'm all good.
All right, good. So I want to thank you all, Mike, for the presentation, Dr. Meyer for the presentation, and Terry and Layla for being the support staff, the experts. And we'll be discussing budget more, but this was a good workshop. It was supposed to be. So I would love to entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second?
Second.
And Fiona seconds, Sanjay and Fiona. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, meeting adjourned at 5:12.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.